I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. The White House says today's Senate budget agreement meets the administration's priorities on defense spending and providing a 2-year budget plan. The agreement on a 2-year, nearly $400 billion budget deal would provide Pentagon and domestic programs with huge spending increases. White House Staff Secretary Rob Porter will resign after a British tabloid reported that he emotionally and physically abused his ex-wives. Porter called the allegations, quote, outrageous. White House Chief of Staff John Kelly defended Porter, calling him, quote, a man of true integrity and honor. Railroad executives are now saying Positive Transit Train Control, or PTC, will likely not be in place by the end of the year. In fact, now the train safety technology won't be installed until 2020. The NTSB says it could have prevented Sunday's Amtrak collision in South Carolina. And another recent derailment near Olympia, Washington. In all, 5 people were killed and dozens more were injured in 2 new crashes. We've got some live pictures we'd like to bring you to the House floor on Capitol Hill. Nancy Pelosi is setting a record for the longest continuous House speech. A House historian says Pelosi topped record speech of 5 hours, 15 minutes. We'll stay on top of that and much more. This is Bloomberg News.
This is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Tesla is sticking to its script. After reporting fourth quarter earnings, the electric car maker still sees its Model 3 production health, meeting weekly goals. We'll break down the results. Plus, our exclusive conversation with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg and why she says the Me Too movement hasn't gone far enough. And day 3 of the bitter Uber-Waymo court battle as former Uber CEO Travis Kalanick once again takes the stand. But first, to our lead. Tesla jumping around in after-hours trading after reporting fourth quarter results and revenue that beat analysts' expectations. The electric car maker burned through cash at a slower clip after making progress building more Model 3 sedans. Tesla reported negative free cash flow of $276.8 million in the fourth quarter, the least in more than a year. Joining us now to further break down the results, Nomura Instinet Managing Director and Senior Analyst Romit Shah, who currently has a buy rating on Tesla, and in San Francisco, our Bloomberg editor-at-large, Corey Johnson. So, Corey, break it all down. I know you've been digging through the numbers. Yeah. What do you see?
Well, I see a company that's been borrowing a lot of money, that's been taking a lot of customer deposits for cars that they can't build. We knew what the numbers were, but it's really striking that a company that was once growing cars produced at 60-70% year-over-year clip is now at less than 1% growth in terms of the number of cars it can build. What we're hearing about the first Model 3s, at least from some of their views, I posted one on my Twitter page at Corey TV that shows some real car guys looking at the car, looking at the engineering of the Model 3, and finding real issues where they can put their thumb right through the side entry to the trunk on one side and can barely see through it on the other side, and that it just looks really uneven, that there's attachments of pieces of felt and things where the door doesn't close quite right and glued onto the door coverings. So they're clearly struggling with the production of this Model 3. It's more than they can handle right now. What we see in the earnings release is lots more promises about production, as we always see from Tesla, and lots more borrowing and poor free cash flow numbers, which is what we also always see from Tesla.
Taking a look at Tesla after hours on the Bloomberg, shares not changed much right now. Yeah. Romit, what do you think? Are the things that Corey is talking about here a concern?
I mean, if you look at the results, what you're seeing here is real progress. They built 220 Model 3 cars in the third quarter. They built over 1,500 Model 3 cars in the fourth quarter. And based on their production guidance for the first quarter, they're going to build probably north of 15,000 vehicles. So if they can continue on this trajectory, and I thought it was important that they reiterated their production guidance from the start of the year, then you got a company who's going to grow their revenues roughly 100%, we think, to about $25 billion. Very hard to find a multi-billion-dollar company growing at this rate.
Corey, let's let's take a look at G#BTV2341.
Right.
Production. Tesla cars produced each quarter over the last several quarters. We're seeing it holding steady. What does that tell you?
Well, it tells me just what we're saying is that producing 1,500 cars in a quarter and a couple hundred the previous quarter isn't what investors thought they were getting involved in. I'd be surprised if Roma actually believes the production guidelines and really thinks that they're going to produce what they've said they're going to produce, since they keep missing their own estimates over and over again. I think the whole world really wants this company to be a great success, and we want great cars that don't burn a lot of fuel, that are great for the environment, look cool, and are safe and fun to drive. The problem is Tesla can't build them.
Romit, do you believe it?
No, I mean, I just look at the numbers. They increased their production of the Model 3 by a factor of 10 in the fourth quarter, and they're targeting to increase it by another factor of 10 in the first quarter. And, cash flow.
But do you believe those numbers, Romit? Like, do you really? Are you going to stand here and say they're going to hit the numbers they're putting in the press release today?
Yeah, we have these production numbers in our model, and if you look at our price target of $500, it's predicated on them growing revenues 100% this year. So, we're in print with these forecasts.
What makes you so confident, when this is a company and a CEO that's admitted, facing production hell and has missed many targets?
It's true, but, you have to think about it this way, that the world is moving towards electric vehicles. And Tesla is really the only game in town, and will be for the next 2 years. And so whether they get to 4,000 units by the end of Q2 or 5,000 units, I think really misses the point here. You've got a multi-billion-dollar company that's growing at a very significant rate. If you look at the reviews, the customer reviews of the Model 3, and we've driven one ourselves, they're phenomenal. I think for most people, it'll probably be the best car they'll ever drive. And you see that in the backlog. They've got a backlog of over 500,000 reservations that continue to grow. So it's a premium car in the right segment of the automotive market. And, all they need to do is gain a couple percent market share in the automobile industry, and they're going to be doing they're going to be doing more than $100 billion in revenue, and I think this stock will be quite a bit higher.
Corey, I know you've been digging into the free cash flow situation here. What are you seeing?
So here's why this matters. The company is going to run out of money if it doesn't get access to more money. And if it can't build the cars and sell them, customer deposits of cars that aren't getting built are only going to last so long. So this is why we pay attention to free cash flow. So the free cash flow number got better this quarter. Check out the chart, G#. I don't know, it's a G# something. It's on the screen here. But this Tesla free cash flow number looks a little better. You see it in yellow, and it gets better. And that's principally not because they're interestingly spending a little bit less in capital expenditures in terms of their factory and so on. But they also had positive cash flow from operations. So you wonder, well, geez, if they only improve the performance of the creations of these new cars a little bit, as Roman mentioned, 1,500 cars, what happened? And you really got to dig into the numbers, and Tesla doesn't tell us. So I want to take it back into my terminal. One of the great things with Bloomberg Terminal is you can instantly pull up company filings by hitting CF. And by hitting CF on this stock, I pull up this most recent company filing. When they get into the actual balance sheet of what the company's doing here, let me pull you into the terminal and share it. They share this combined consolidated number of changes in operating assets and liabilities. I don't know if we can pull up that chart or not here. But it's strangely a positive number of about $500 million. And so the question is, well, how do they do that? And what was the change in deposits? It's like, I guess we can't pull up that number. But that number's been negative most of the recent quarters. They don't give us the full cash flow statement so we can see what those changes are. But they had about a $500 million improvement in cash flow or positive cash flow from operations. And virtually all of this comes from some likely non-cash changes in operating assets and liabilities. That's why free cash flow looks better, but it might actually not mean more free cash.
All right, Corey Johnson, our editor at large. You can find that chart, G#BTV2434. Thank you. Romit Smith, Nomura Instant Managing Director and Senior Analyst. Thank you, Romit, for joining us. A stock we are watching, Snap shares soaring nearly 50% after reporting its first earnings beat as a public company. Snap says fourth quarter sales rose to a better than expected 72%, and the number of daily active users rose 18%. These Q4 results prompted at least 5 analyst upgrades. Coming up, former Google VP and White House CTO Megan Smith joins us to discuss challenges surrounding improving diversity in the workplace and culture in technology. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. Listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. The Winklevoss brothers are not giving up on cryptocurrency. That is despite Bitcoin plunging below the $6,000 mark to the lowest since mid-November.
We're long on the space. We don't sit there and watch the price day to day. We're in this for the long haul, whether that's a decade or many decades. So, like I said earlier, we remember when Bitcoin was $8. So as far as we're concerned, it's all gravy from here.
The twins are early Bitcoin investors, and at one point their net worth totaled more than $1 billion each when digital was at an all-time high last winter. They also just told Bloomberg Television that increased regulation is good for the cryptocurrency space. Well, over the last few years, big tech firms and startups have disclosed the gender and racial makeup of their workforces. But for many companies, the numbers remain stagnant, with no real signs of improvement. I've covered this topic extensively in my book, Brotopia, Breaking Up the Boys Club of Silicon Valley. And my next guest has also championed improving diversity in the workforce as the third chief technology officer of the United States under President Obama, and as a vice president at Google before that. Megan Smith, CEO of Shift7, joins us now from Washington. Megan, so great to have you back here on the show. You have been out over the last several months on a tech jobs tour to get more people into technology. And I'm curious what you're seeing in terms of diversity of the people who want to come into this industry and how it compares to the diversity of people who are already here.
Yeah, we've been all over the country, across Appalachia, Milwaukee, we were just in Oakland. We had lines out the door everywhere we went, and there's people from all backgrounds across this country who would love to be part of the tech sector. When we're coming into town, Cheyenne, Denver, Atlanta, we just get the word out, and then we're running kind of an evening career fair, and the tech companies are showing up. People are showing up for the speed mentoring we're doing. So a lot of people want in on these better, higher paying jobs. They pay 50% more than the average American salary. There's hundreds of thousands of jobs open in America in every sector. Really, all companies are software tech companies at this point.
And yet, gender representation in computing, women make up 25% of computing jobs. The statistics for blacks and Latinos are downright depressing, and women-led companies are getting just 2% of funding. Why do you think that is still?
Just extraordinary sexism and racism, ageism, all of this. And we really have to evolve out of this culture. And your book is wonderful, Emily. And I'm about halfway through, and I know so many people in there, and it's just full of, we got ourselves into this, let's pattern map the person, or this kind of profile that the VCs were funding. It's really a huge challenge. As you said, over 90% of money from the venture world is going to men. 75%, on the Tech Jobs Tour and on Rise of the Rest from Steve Case, it's really going to Silicon Valley, New York, and Boston. So lots of the country. I remember being with Steve. We were in Columbus, Ohio, and he was saying, Ohio is getting in 1 year what Silicon Valley is getting in a week. So this is diversity of location, of people. We have so much talent in America. We've got to field the whole team. I'm encouraged from the tour because I saw so many extraordinary entrepreneurs from, all backgrounds that we really need to get behind, and they'll lift this country.
I'm not sure if you've gotten through the Google chapter yet, but, I write in the book that Google's founders, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, really focused on hiring strong women in the early days, and they got some incredible women like Sheryl Sandberg and Susan Wojcicki and yourself. And if you look at the numbers today, Google's numbers are simply average, and they're facing this big lawsuit from the Department of Labor about pay disparities between men and women. What do you think went wrong there, or what is the lesson in that?
It's in all of the companies. We just have extraordinary bias built in. And so, as we're asking questions, the interview bias, leadership really has to just make this a very top priority. The leaders of all the tech companies, like all companies, care about diversity. But it needs to move from number 20 to number 1 to 3. Diverse teams just make better products. So it's a shareholder value opportunity and import for everybody. So we really need to do this work. There's lots of stuff that most companies aren't doing. We wrote a piece in the White House called Raise the Floor, and we just listed all the things that leaders, you can do in your culture. There's so many practices that would make a huge difference if people would pick them up, and most people don't know them. So we really have a reckoning. This is a form of time's up. It's been plenty of time. Let's go. We have tons of history that brought us to this place, but none of us created this problem. But once we know about it, let's go.
You mentioned the Time's Up movement, an outgrowth of the Me Too movement. I actually just spoke with Sheryl Sandberg. We're going to hear a little bit more from her later about the Me Too movement. And, there's been sort of a backlash against it. I asked her, has Me Too gone too far? Take a listen to what she had to say.
I think the question is not if Me Too has gone too far, but if Me Too has gone far enough. Because this can't just be a moment in time where people raise their voice. These brave women that have raised their voices, they want long-standing change that's not just for the day or the month, but for the years and the decades. And that means we have to have the right institutional policies. And those policies have to include due process investigations. Things need to be investigated and swift action needs to be taken. And importantly, we need to end the culture of complicity. We need to end the practice of looking the other way and then it's not your responsibility, because it's all of our responsibility.
Megan, discrimination is one thing, sexual harassment is another. What do you think about the criticism of the Me Too movement that it's crossed a line?
Sexual harassment is rampant, and it's very clear from all the brave people who are speaking up. I think many men are in shock, learning how rampant it is, and we really need women and men to come together and really push forward. My sister-in-law, when she was a young engineer in the 70s, used to have a Hustler centerfold above her lab bench as she was doing chip design, because that was normal. And you open your book with the photograph that was this was the photograph that people were using to bench test all the different screens, and it was a picture of a woman, but actually it was a picture of a completely naked woman from Playboy. When I was at Google, a story that you don't know is I found out about this, and I asked Alan Eustace, who was head of engineering, if we could stop using it, and he said, of course. And we immediately stopped. And so men and women can work together. None of us created that problem, but it's long-standing. You also write about Ada Lovelace. Ada Lovelace wasn't even allowed to write a proper paper, the founder of algorithms in the 1800s. And so she took a piece that she was translating, a 20-page piece that she translated, and she added 55-page thesis of what modern computing, what would be this idea of algorithms, wrote the first algorithm. She's the founder of what has become, computer programming and coding. And we need to know about her. And I had never even heard of her until I was at 10 Downing Street one time and saw her portrait.
I'm so glad to hear that story about Lena and how receptive management was to it at Google. You mentioned some prescriptive things that companies can do, and I'm curious, in your work at Shift 7, what are the top 3 things that people who want to make this a priority can do, whether their companies are big or small?
Yeah, I think what's exciting is there are very good things to do. For example, leaders just talking about it. One of the greatest moves was Lou Gerstner at IBM just prioritized this as part of the transition in the 90s. And he took those employee resource groups that everybody has, most companies have them, the LGBT group, the women's group, the veterans group, African Americans, Hispanics, all these different groups of talented employees. And he connected his executive team, which was not as diverse, to those employees and created not only just, talking to them once in a while, but really knowing. And he added it to the agenda of the weekly executive meeting. So suddenly this voice of many more employees was coming up. And then he asked those people very specifically, how do I get more employees, more customers, and more suppliers from your community? And how do I help you thrive at IBM? And it really made a huge difference. So it's really, I would say the move there is a structured, broad conversation, and then look for what's working and then share that and make that broader.
All right, well, I appreciate you sharing what you've learned with us, Megan Smith of Shift 7, former CTO of the USA. Thank you, as always, for stopping by, and thanks for reading the book.
Thanks, Emily. Congrats on it. It's fabulous. Everybody read it.
Thank you. Okay, coming up, day 3 of Waymo versus Uber is through, and so is Travis Kalanick's time on the witness stand. We look at what went down in the courthouse and what's yet to come. This is Bloomberg. Travis Travis Kalanick's time on the witness stand during the Uber-Waymo trade secrets trial has come to an end. During the second day, the former CEO of Uber's testimony, Waymo's lawyers went after him, painting a picture of someone obsessed with winning the race for self-driving supremacy. Joel Rosenblatt, who covers the courts for Bloomberg, has been in the courtroom for the last several days. So, Joel, give us the play-by-play of Kalanick's testimony.
Well, this is his second day, and Waymo's lawyers came at him kind of hard, not as hard as you might expect. And then, of course, on cross-examination, Uber's own lawyers were asking him questions which were clearly he was very well prepared for. Waymo, the big kind of news, the big surprise really to me was that Waymo didn't come at him very hard. There are a lot of details that Waymo has dug up over the course of this litigation that are very troublesome for Uber, and they really didn't ask Travis Kalanick about very many of those. And that was a bit of a surprise to me. So does that make you think Waymo doesn't have as strong of a case as you might have thought? Initially, I was kind of wondering that, but then as I puzzled through it, and then as I stayed in the courtroom after Travis Kalanick left, you saw what was going on. Travis Kalanick offered a lot of kind of I don't knows, I don't remember, about a lot of the kind of more difficult pieces that they asked about, that Waymo asked about, as you predicted, Emily. And I should have taken a better cue from you. And then after he left, and I think Waymo has just kind of figured out that that's what they're going to get from him. And then after he left, a forensic expert, a computer forensic expert that is kind of evaluated the case and evaluated the most damning evidence, came in and offered testimony about all kinds of kind of data and the technical issues, technical kind of problems that Uber has, and it got very damning. It got very problematic very quickly, and it was kind of just an interesting contrast to Travis Kalanick's testimony. So what is next? Hopefully fewer I do not recalls. Yeah, there will be fewer of those. It will be interesting. Larry Page is still up. I think that's kind of later, but it'll be interesting. He's a very quiet person. I've seen him testify before, and he's been a bit awkward. I think he's going to have to kind of show up and be a bit better in court than I've seen him as a result of Kalanick's good performance. I mean, it was a good performance for Uber. So now we're going to see some very difficult evidence, some technical evidence, and we're going to learn just how deep into the weeds this jury is willing to get. I think that's the real question. It's always kind of a dicey proposition to guess what juries are going to do or what they're thinking. Right. In my experience, juries have taken the effort to really dig into stuff, and if they do that, Waymo's still very much alive. Okay, Joel Rosenblatt. I'm sure Larry Page is preparing for this. Joel Rosenblatt of Bloomberg News, thank you so much. Coming up, has the Me Too movement gone too far? Our exclusive conversation with Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg and her new call to action. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. White House Press Secretary Sarah Huckabee Sanders praised the Senate budget agreement, saying it will provide certainty for the next 2 years. She also criticized Democratic House Leader Nancy Pelosi, who gave a marathon speech today in support of young immigrant dreamers.
The budget deal should be a budget deal, and that members of Congress, like Nancy Pelosi, should not hold our military hostage over a separate issue.
Pelosi has spoken now for more than 5 hours and already set the record for the longest House speech. That's a live picture you're looking at. She continues to speak on the House floor in opposition to the spending deal that's been worked out. Kim Jong-un is sending his sister as North Korea's official representative to the Winter Olympics. Kim Yo-jong will attend the opening ceremony in Pyeongchang tomorrow as the world leaders, including Mike Pence, gather for that event. It will be the first visit by the South to the South by an immediate member of the North's ruling family. The death toll from a magnitude 6.4 earthquake in Taiwan has risen now to 7. Nearly 200 people have been rescued so far from 4 buildings that nearly toppled. but dozens more remain unaccounted for. Military personnel and volunteers are assisting the rescue teams with the search. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg. Just after 5:30 p.m. here in Washington, it is already 6:30 Thursday morning now in Hong Kong, where we are joined by Bloomberg's David Ingles with a look at the markets. David, good morning to you.
Very good morning to you, Elisa. So the mood right now, if I could make an analogy, it's almost like that movie Jaws, right? We know the shark's still in the water, so I mean, go back in at your own risk. And that's certainly what we saw already yesterday afternoon, Wednesday afternoon here in the Asia Pacific, when markets suddenly started cascading lower, and we basically just wiped out all of our gains. You guys, of course, they're closed lower into the close. Looking at futures, little bit of a bid when you look at some of these markets. Australia, though, might open a little bit weaker. Japan might just get some support from earnings, but that being said, that's an early story when you look at today's session. South Korea, of course, just got collapsed yesterday into the close. So a biggest 4-day drop, in fact, for South Korea, which opens up in 90 minutes, going back to 2012. I mentioned a lot of earnings to get through. There's also some key data coming out of the region here. We have trade numbers out of Japan and China as well. We just had a rate decision out of New Zealand, and that's really putting some pressure on the Kiwi dollar. Later on this afternoon, EM focus here with a look at the Philippines. Central bank decision there.
To our top story of the day. After a few wild swings, Tesla stock pretty much unchanged in late trading after reporting fourth quarter results. Revenue beating analyst expectations. The electric car maker moderated what had been a red-hot pace of cash burn as Elon Musk made slow progress building more Model 3 sedans and took deposits for new electric semi-trucks and sports cars. Bloomberg's Detroit bureau chief David Welch joins us now. So, David, what do you make of the results?
Overall, more good news than bad. Okay, the loss was bigger than expected. It was $4.01 per share, but that's not really what Tesla trades on, right? The cash flow, like you mentioned earlier, much less than analysts expected. It was about $278 million. That's his free cash burn, we'll call it. So about a third what the street was expecting, which is good. The main thing everyone's looking at is the Model 3. Is this going to start, really getting out there in real numbers for people to buy and to bring revenue in? And what Elon said is that they will be up to 5,000 cars a week, which was half of their original target by middle of the year. Now, you saw the shares bouncing around. At first, they got up about $5 or $6 over the close, which is good. I think people saw the 5,000 a week by mid-year as a sign that they're getting their hands on the manufacturing problems they've had. However, if you really dig into the release and the letter from Elon, they don't say when they'll get to 10,000. And if Elon's not going to give a target, since he doesn't really hit them when he actually gives targets, that says that they don't really know when they're going to be able to get up to 10,000 cars a week. So that was kind of the part of the bad news here. He was also fairly moderate on how he described demand for the Model 3. In other words, new orders and deposits coming in. He said they were stable. This is a guy who is pretty effusive about his cars and how his business is going. Stable is a word that kind of says, yeah, it may be cooling off a bit. Perhaps buyers are saying, okay, I like the Model 3, but until I hear that these manufacturing issues are taken care of, I might just hold off a bit.
The call's about to start. I do want to talk about what's on the horizon. Elon has talked about a 2-door roadster coming, a commercial truck, a compact SUV, new factories in Europe and China. What are you looking towards on the horizon in the near versus the long term?
And you forgot a pickup truck.
Oh, I'm sure there's more.
That's in the plan, too. So the two things he talked about today were the Roadster being developed in stealth. So it sounds like they're further along than maybe people thought. And he also talked about Tesla, the company itself, being the first one to buy this commercial truck, the rig, the semi. And so that tells you that, okay, maybe that's not too far off. He didn't talk at all about the compact SUV. He didn't talk at all about a pickup truck. So that tells you that is further out. And look, they've got a lot of spending to do to get to 10,000 vehicles a week for the Model 3. He did say that they won't get to 10,000 a week until they get to 5,000. But what he means is they won't even start installing that capacity. That means additional expenditure. So in order to get to the other vehicles you're talking about, they've got to get the Model 3 up to $10,000 a week, and then they've got to spend money on all of these other vehicles. That tells me that that they've got issues with just paying for everything that they want to do near term and long term. So I think the vehicles he mentioned are those that they're going to be working on. But again, no deadline on any of those. I don't think we're going to be into serious production, toward 10,000 a week of the Model 3 until 2019. All right. And for the other cars and trucks beyond that, geez, who knows?
All right, Bloomberg's David Welch in Detroit for us. Thanks for breaking it all down. Well, Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg has a new call to action in the wake of the Me Too movement, and it is all about getting more men to mentor women. Sandberg's Lean In initiative has just published a survey that shows a majority of men are now more uncomfortable working alone with women or mentoring them, something Sandberg calls unacceptable. We sat down for an exclusive interview to talk about her new Mentor Her movement, the backlash against Me Too, and more. Take a listen.
Now is a watershed moment. Me Too has shined a light on the need to end sexual harassment for good, forever, and that is critically important. It's also critically important, as you write in your book, that we get more women into leadership roles. Today we're publishing a survey done by Lean In and SurveyMonkey, which says that almost half of male managers in the U.S. are now afraid to do common work activities with women. And if the reaction to what's going on is that men stop mentoring women, that's unacceptable, because we need more women in leadership roles, and women have long gotten less mentorship and sponsorship than men, particularly women of color. So now's the time to invest more in women, not less. And so Mentor Her, which we're launching today, calls on all leaders to mentor women, but also to make access equal. Our survey also shows that a senior man today is 3.5 times more likely to hesitate to have dinner with a junior female colleague than a junior male colleague, and 5 times less likely to feel that they can travel with a junior female colleague than a male colleague. We have to make access equal. If you're not comfortable having dinner alone with a woman, then don't have dinner alone with a man. Have lunches and breakfasts with everyone. Or have dinner, but make sure everyone's behaving appropriately. What matters is that access for women is equal. Because again, now is our time to invest more, not less, in getting more women into leadership roles.
You've shared your own experiences with harassment, a hand on your leg, under the table, at a meeting, unwanted visits to your hotel room to the point where you had to call security. 25% of the people in your survey think the reports we've heard so far of sexual harassment are just the tip of the iceberg. Do you agree? And what do you think is the next chapter here?
I feel fortunate that everyone I've ever worked for has been not just appropriate, but supportive. And then my next sentence thought to myself is, that shouldn't be lucky, that should be a basic, because every woman and man deserves a safe and secure workplace, and that needs to change. But in order for it to change, we need institutional long-ranging change. So we need companies of all types, organizations of all types, to adopt clear policies. Policies that when reports are made, things are investigated, there is swift action taken. We need victims to feel safe, no retribution, the legal support they need, the social support they need. And we need to really end the culture of complicity, where people can look the other way and not feel responsible. We're all responsible for what goes on in the workforce. And importantly, we need more women in leadership. It's not a surprise to figure out that organizations that have more women in leadership roles have lower levels of sexual harassment and better work-life policies and perform at a higher rate, because more diverse teams perform better. And so in this watershed moment, we need to make sure that we really, really continue to invest and get more women in leadership roles.
Some people have complained that the Me Too movement has gone too far, that some of the stories that have been told shouldn't be told, and this is more like a public lynching. What do you think?
I think the question is not if Me Too has gone too far, but if Me Too has gone far enough. Because this can't just be a moment in time where people raise their voice. These brave women that have raised their voices, They want long-standing change that's not just for the day or the month, but for the years and the decades. And that means we have to have the right institutional policies. And those policies have to include due process, investigations. Things need to be investigated and swift action needs to be taken. And importantly, we need to end the culture of complicity. We need to end the practice of looking the other way and then it's not your responsibility, because it's all of our responsibility.
Ev Williams, the co-founder of Twitter, told me in my book that he thinks if there were more women on the early Twitter team early on, maybe online harassment and trolling wouldn't be such a problem, that they weren't thinking about this enough. They were thinking about great things that could be done with their product, not how it might be used to send death threats. You know, my understanding is also that when you got to Facebook, you started asking questions about the content policies, and that may well be why Facebook does a much better job of this than Twitter. How do you think the internet might be different if women had been more involved in more equal numbers at building it early on? Like, do you think online harassment and trolling would be the problem it is today?
I think the data is super clear that more women in leadership roles in all industry has huge positive benefits. Higher performance for those companies, better work-life policies, lower levels of sexual harassment. And I do think that women play an important role in looking out for some of the gender-based harassment that women have long faced. I think Facebook is lucky because our leader, Mark Zuckerberg, takes these issues every bit as seriously as I have. But do I think Silicon Valley would be a better place if there were more women running more companies? Absolutely. I think every industry would be a better place if there were more women running more companies and more women in government. And when we fought to get here, but women are 20% of the U.S. Congress. And I think we often suffer from the tyranny of low expectations. I remember when women got 20% of the seats in the Senate in 2012, and all the articles were like, women take over the Senate. You're like, wait a second. 50% of the population with 20% of the seats is not a takeover. It's a gap. And I think we need to make sure that in this watershed moment, we make the long-standing change we need. No sexual harassment ever for anyone, and investing in women so that women get their share of the leadership roles. We are very far from that, but this is a moment where we can invest more to make it happen.
Indeed, absolutely. That was our exclusive interview with Facebook COO, Sheryl Sandberg. Coming up, how to fix the male-dominated culture of Silicon Valley. We look at the one group that may hold the key. That's next. This is Bloomberg. Well, if there's one thing we've learned about bad behavior in Silicon Valley over the last year is that it's not just about the people who cross the line. It's about those who enable it. For many investors backing entrepreneurs, the ends justify the means. But can that really be an excuse anymore? In my new book, Brotopia, I took a look at the one group of people who might be able to have a bigger impact, limited partners, the people who fund the VCs that fund startups. To discuss, I'd like to welcome Atul Rushi, a partner at Accolade Partners and an investor in VC firms like Andreessen Horowitz and Excel. Atul, thanks so much for joining us. Limited partners are traditionally very press shy, so I've appreciated you and your colleague Joelle Caden speaking with me about this issue and how LPs are handling it. I'd like to go back a little bit to the revelations that we've heard over the last year about bad behavior in the VC communities. As somebody who funds VCs, how have you received news of this bad behavior?
Well, we've received it like almost everybody else through the press, through social media. That's been the primary way where we've seen it. And frankly, it's been shocking, it's been disturbing, but that's the primary way we've received most of this information.
So, you know, as I spoke with Joelle, your colleague, she told me that while, of course, she would love to see more women around the table, ultimately, you guys invest based on returns. Right. Do you think that should change? Do you think that maybe there should be more of a focus on, you know, who the people are versus what money you're going to get out of it at the end?
So our primary mandate is based on returns, but diversity has a role within returns. And there are many flavors of diversity. It could be gender diversity, race, or even background experience. Over the past few decades, you've seen the operating work experience diversity implemented where certain firms have financial investors and they also have people with operating industry experience. I think in this environment, you're seeing a lot more emphasis on gender diversity. I mean, every conversation we have with managers, more today than ever before, there is an active discussion about bringing in more gender diversity, and you're even seeing it. We have a number of managers where up-and-coming investment professionals are primarily women. So it's becoming more part of the dialogue, and there's action around it from a number of the venture capitalists out there.
What are you hearing from other LPs? Because, you know, historically, LPs haven't cared much about diversity. I mean, do you think there's movement happening in the industry as a whole, or that ultimately your firm is the exception and not the rule?
No, our firm is not the exception. I mean, again, most firms are focused on returns. I think for a lot of limited partners, they didn't fully get a sense of the type of behavior that was occurring in the industry. And for GPs particularly, if they didn't understand the consequences of such behavior, they definitely understand it today. And VCs, I think today more than ever, or LPs more today than ever before, won't tolerate that behavior. So I think it is top of mind for a lot of limited partners, and it's part of the dialogue that they have with VCs. And you know, if there is ever indication of continued bad behavior, I think those GPs will get a very rude awakening in the sense that they won't be able to raise capital going forward.
So I know you're invested in a wide range of funds. Andreessen Horowitz and Excel in particular actually don't have any female partners. What kinds of conversations are you having with them about this topic?
So for many of them, they have established partnership groups, and that the partnership group, there isn't turnover on a regular basis. Where there has been movement is on the junior and up-and-coming professionals, where there has been more of an emphasis on gender diversity. And for some of the firms that are newer in nature, again, more of an emphasis to bring senior professionals that are female. So with the established firms where there's less turnover, there's less leeway they can do at the top level, but they are definitely active in trying to incorporate more gender diversity at the junior levels, and at some point those individuals will become partners there or somewhere else.
So we have about 30 seconds left. You know, how do you expect funding to change over the next year, given sort of the backdrop that we're operating against?
I think going forward, if there's any indication of bad behavior or questionable behavior, there'll be very little support for those types of managers. Again, where there might have been leeway before, I think there's no leeway going forward, nor should there be. So it's not only top of mind for the limited partners, it's definitely top of mind for the general partners themselves. So I'm very hopeful that this type of behavior, given what we've seen over the past year, will be fairly eliminated going forward, because it's unacceptable. It should never have been there, and now it's so apparent to everybody that it shouldn't occur going forward. Now I'm hopeful.
Absolutely. Okay, Atul Rushi, partner at Accolade, thank you so much for stopping by and sharing traditionally not shared views from the LP community. All right, Elevation Partners co-founder Roger McNamee coming up. He explains why he thinks Facebook should change its business model and not rely on advertising. This is Bloomberg. In the latest episode of Bloomberg Studio 1.0, we sit down with Elevation Partners and Silver Lake co-founder Roger McNamee. We talk Facebook, of course, and where he thinks the social media giant is falling short.
All I'm saying to Facebook is, guys, you've won. You don't need to have this kind of business model. There is a way to have a business model that's actually better. My point is, I'd like to spend $10 a month, and I want to be able to control my news feed, right? I want to take the ads out. I want it to be more valuable to them, but I want to be able to have one version of the news feed that's politics, one version that's my family, one that's sports, one that's health and fitness, one that's work-related, right? And be able to toggle through them and really control things. And I want them to be successful, and I think they can be.
They say they're hiring 10,000 more people to handle some of these issues, whether it's fake news or abuse. Is that not enough?
Not only is it not enough, it's completely irrelevant. So you cannot fix this damage after the fact with people policing it. These things are embedded in the algorithms. The same thing that makes Facebook the most compelling ad platform for rock and roll bands and consumer products companies and financial services companies makes it the perfect platform for bad actors to abuse people. You only can fix this problem by fixing the algorithms.
How so?
Well, you essentially have to change the business model. You have to make it so that anger and fear are not the predominant ways that people are motivated to act on Facebook. Again, without advertising, if you're not dependent on advertising or not as dependent on advertising, you don't need people to be addicted. You don't need to make them angry. You don't need to make them fearful.
So if they don't make money on ads, then how do they make money?
I'm saying I want to pay them a subscription. I mean, I want to pay them $10 a month. I want to pay them more than twice what they're making from me today. And I'm looking at this and saying, hey, name the price. My point is, you want to still have ads for some people? Fine. But give me the option of having a different thing. I'm saying what they're doing now is the lazy way out. These people are smarter and better than that.
What about regulation?
So I think regulation is important. And the way to think about this is that the most important thing is for the employees of Facebook to recognize that things have come off the rails and that they have the power to fix it.
Have you heard from Mark? Have you heard from Sheryl?
No, but I suspect their lawyers have told them not to. And my point here is I would love to. I mean, I will know. The way you know when people have a problem and that they're serious about fixing it is they reach out to their critics to understand the issues. And I'm sitting here and I understand why people would be mad at me. I really do. But I would have everybody just ask the question, what's actually in this for me, okay? I mean, seriously, I don't need this.
If they don't do this, what do you think will happen?
Our democracy is in extreme peril right now, and we don't have a lot of time to fix this. The elections are coming up in November, and we don't have a lot of time to essentially safeguard them. And this next time, it's not just the Russians you have to worry about.
That was Elevation Partners co-founder and Silver Lake co-founder Roger McNamee. Catch that full conversation with McNamee tonight. Bloomberg Studio 1.0, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. This is Bloomberg.